Miranda July once said, "The things keeping you back, these embarrassing, boring, stupid obstacles, are the heart of what it is to be human. They're the whole reason for making and needing art, so you might as well go ahead and begin in whatever way you can right now." This is the Producers Lounge Podcast, the best podcast online for tips and tricks on producing great film, television, and web content. Welcome back for Season 3, Episode 24, hosted and produced by greaterandgrander.com. On this week's episode, we're chatting with Suju Vijayan, who has produced web content, television series, independent features, and news programming, including The Bachelor, The Bachelorette, The Amazing Race, StoryCorps, A&E Biography, Intimate Portraits for Lifetime, and many more. We discuss working as a journalist and making PBS shows about other countries, how film schools connect you to jobs, why you never give an actor final cut, what happens when you have to fire your best friend, the biggest challenges of shooting an independent feature, and the difficulties of always looking for freelance work. Suju has had a jet-setting life growing up in Northern California, working in New York, India, Los Angeles, South Africa, and elsewhere. Here now is my conversation with Suju Vijayan.
How long have you been doing this?
Well, this is the third season.
Oh, great. Good for you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm really happy with how it's turned out so
Good.
far. So, yeah.
I know Joelle, and so I just chatted with her I just emailed, and she said, "Oh yeah, Richard asked really good questions. It was really interesting. It was fun to do." And I was like, "All right, great. Awesome. Yeah."
Awesome. I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah.
Also, I ran into Mike briefly.
He mentioned that he saw you at the animation event.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, he said there was some pretty cool VR.
Yes,
Yeah.
that was a traumatizing experience.
It's like a lot of zombie killing. Yeah, totally.
And to add to it, apparently the guys who work for the company, they were banging around on the inside of the thing.
Oh, really? Oh, that's hilarious. So they were like adding to the effect. Yeah.
Exactly.
Oh, that's funny. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Very cool though. Yeah. He said it was cool. He was impressed. He was like, "I didn't know we were going to get to do a whole VR thing." He's like, "That was pretty cool." Yeah. Hi. How are you? Warm. Yes. That water definitely helps. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Can I get you anything else? Iced tea?
I'll have an iced tea actually. Yeah. Thank you.
So to answer your question from earlier,
Yeah.
I'm coming from Hollywood, and there was apparently a carnival for Caribbean indigenous people.
Oh, okay.
Sunset.
Okay.
So there were whole chunks of Hollywood that were closed off.
Okay. So it was the whole. Well, you got here in plenty of time. No problem.
Yes.
Yeah, I'll just get a Cobb salad. That sounds good. Sort of lunchy now that I've done breakfast.
Nice.
Yes. We had leftover challah bread, so our son was like, "Please make French toast." We're like, "All right, yeah."
And what have you been up to lately?
Pardon me. I have been a couple of things. Mike and I do a bunch of work for StoryCorps. I don't know if you're familiar with them, right?
So StoryCorps.
Right.
Let me make sure I get this
Yeah.
right. So they are through the National Archives.
Yeah.
They're like one-on-one voice interviews.
That's right.
And I know they air the episodes on a podcast and NPR sometimes.
Correct. And so in order for them to make money, what they do is they sell their services to foundations and companies. So essentially they're like, for instance, we just did one for the Chautauqua Institution, which recently is better known for where Salman Rushdie got stabbed, quite honestly. But yeah, I know. So we were kind of like, oh, are they trying to like remedy their reputation?
Yeah.
But essentially, so we're doing something for the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation right now, and essentially they're like, okay, so you're going to have people talk about like a certain theme, like maybe the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation gave out community awards. So it'd be someone talking to their dad about the award they won and the work they do in the community. And then we animate around that and create these things. And they're mainly for internal use by the corporation or by the, or the foundation. But they're always nice, like they're kind of heartwarming. You feel good making them. They're heartwarming pieces about people doing good stuff,
Nice.
So we enjoy that. And that is kind of a bread and butter thing we've had for the last few years, even through the strikes. Even though their numbers came down, even though they're not involved in Hollywood, just the economy overall, I think, their numbers came down, but they've been consistent for several years now. Yeah, we've been doing those.
Fantastic.
So,
to hear, yeah.
It's good stuff.
And from what I know, they're like an actual benevolent organization. They're not just trying to sell you cars.
No, they're not. And it's funny because we did one, we did some for like pharmaceutical companies. I was like, oh, I hope these aren't like, terrible pharmaceutical companies.
Yeah.
But I will say the things we do, it's not like, heavily trying to market. It's more like two people who are caregivers for people with Alzheimer's talk about what it takes to take care of someone with Alzheimer's. So yeah, no, they're very nice people. We met them a year ago over spring break. We were in New York and we went to their main office in Brooklyn and actually got to meet them in person, and they're very nice people. And yeah, they're very, sincere with what they're doing, which I appreciate. Yeah.
Really cool.
Yeah, so that's been a nice gig. We like that a lot. Yeah.
And it's funny because like as I've been delving into more of the corporate world,
Right.
I've been tracking a lot more of like RFQs and RFPs,
Right.
and how those companies will send those out to
Yep.
try and find artists or agency clients. Is that how you and Mike found Storyteller?
Yeah, I mean, I do think. Well, in Mike's case, we work together, but he works more in animation, and I work more in live action. And so, in Mike's case, he had put together a group post 2016 election called Our Next 4 Years, which was making progressive PSAs, right? Animated PSAs. And one of the fellow board members on that, he did some work for them for StoryCorps, and they said, hey, they're looking for folks to do this part of the work, like this arm of it. Could I recommend you? And he said yes, and then it worked out. Signed 1 2-year contract. We're in the middle of a second one, so it was sort of through, you do work to do good stuff, like especially the progressive PSAs, but it also worked out that we got some work off of it, which was nice, So yeah. So Mike found that through that, but yeah, definitely the corporate world. There's RFPs. There's all kinds of stuff going on, like to do stuff done, and StoryCorps doesn't have a ton of money, but a lot of the corporations do, and they can fund things very well, I think. Yeah.
Mazel tov. Yeah.
So it's good stuff, for sure.
So let me ask, like, going back.
Sure.
Where did you grow up originally?
I grew up in Davis, in Northern California.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. My parents immigrated from India, and they were both at the medical school at UC Davis.
Yeah.
And my mom taught neuroanatomy for like 35 years. And my dad was a practicing physician. He is a neurologist and headache specialist. And so we grew up, my sister and I, we grew up in Davis. And first 17 years of my life were in Davis. It's a very nice small town, lots of bikes, very university focused because most people's families are affiliated with the university in some way or another.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was a very nice place to grow up, for sure.
I always had you pegged for a New Yorker for some reason.
I think it's because I talk fast. people think that about me. They do think I'm a New Yorker. They're like, are you from New York? No, I just talk fast.
And so let me ask, growing up in Davis, when did you decide you wanted to get into entertainment?
Well, I didn't decide then. I always loved movies. My dad, who unfortunately passed away in December, he, thank you very much, appreciate that. But he loved movies, and Indians in general, Indians love movies. And he grew up poor in India, and the entertainment really was cinema, And so, he when he eventually came here, he continued to love movies. And because they came from India, they spoke perfect English. They could understand the movies. Everything was that way. It was easy. And so he would always take us to movies, even if the movie was like, maybe we shouldn't go see that movie at this age. It never occurred to him. You know what I mean? And so we would go see everything. So I loved movies, I loved movies. But then when I went to college, I thought I was going to be a journalist. I thought I was interested in journalism. And
where was college?
I went to college at Princeton. Yeah. So I did live back east. You were right about that. So I went to college at Princeton, and I was a history major, and I minored in women's studies and African American studies.
Oh wow.
Yeah, and so I like to write and to research and to think about that kind of stuff. We had to write a thesis before graduating. But I thought I'd go into journalism, though I was a little uncertain by the time I left. So when I got out of college, I got an internship at The Nation magazine in New York, which is like a long-standing progressive magazine. And it was like $75 a week internship, like terrible pay. I'd worked all summer at a clothing store at home to save some money up. This was a while ago, but I don't want to date myself. I won't say when, but it was a while ago.
And to give context, because roughly speaking, I think we're of the same
Right.
Like $75 a week for an internship. That's one of the good offers.
Right. And at least they gave us something, and was a little sad. One of the interns would go to the bank at the end of the week and get the cash out and give it to each of us. It was like, okay. But, I had saved money over the summer, and I had friends who were living in Brooklyn before it was super expensive, and they helped me find a sublet in Brooklyn. And so I had a cheap place to live, and we could make it work. When you're young, you don't care. But I had worked the summer before, lived at home so that I could afford a place in New York.
Right.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you.
And at the time, it was like, more affordable, and we were young, so we were like, okay, we'll just do whatever, we'll live however we live, and we had jazz musicians who were my housemates would play in the subways, and so yeah, it was really fun, and so it was a good time. I had a lot of friends from college who lived in Brooklyn, so it was really fun. And so I worked at The Nation for like a few months. It was the internship, the length of the internship. And we basically were fact checkers. We were just checking all the facts at that time, like calling people and being like, hey, is this okay? Is this right? Like, did you say that? And then I got a gig as a fact checker and a freelance copy editor at the Village Voice, which was still around at the time. And I did that. And then I kind of just started, then I was the assistant to the arts editor briefly. I just kind of did whatever they needed at the time. And then I kind of flit around a little bit. I worked as a fact checker at Ms. Magazine. I did some temping. So I was just kind of like, and I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do. I was like, this is cool, but I don't know what I want to do. But I decided I did want to travel.
Right.
So I started saving my money.
How long after college was
So I spent about a year and let's say 3 or 4 months in New York. 16 months in New York.
Wow.
And and I also worked, I forgot to mention, I worked on a PBS show about South Africa, which was really interesting. Yeah. I didn't get to go to South Africa or anything, but it was just an interesting, and it was kind of a move from print also into video. So that was kind of cool for me too. I was like, oh, I like video. That's interesting. But then I decided, okay, I want to travel. I want to go, do stuff. And so I got a kind of a round the world ticket and I went to Indonesia, where I had a friend living in Jakarta, and I saw him, and then I traveled in Indonesia on my own. And then I went to Thailand, and I had two friends there in Peace Corps. And then one of them, his girlfriend was a good friend of mine, one of my college roommates. And so she and I met up with him, and then I went and visited our other friend. And then I ended up going to India to visit relatives. And I'd been as a kid, I'd visited family. And then I spent one summer there working with a women's group in New Delhi. And so then I went to India, and I ended up in New Delhi with some family and some other kind of more distant relatives, like family of my family. And they were like, oh, what are you going to do next when you go back? I'm like, I don't know. And they said, do you want to work here? And I said, well, sure, why not? That would be fun. And so this kind of distant aunt knew this woman who was in charge of a weekly news program that was in English, so that was kind of key, obviously, because I couldn't really speak any other Indian language as well. And I went to meet with her, and she really just did it as a favor for my distant relative. But when I told her the things I'd done, she was like, oh, you actually have experience in journalism. I said, I have done some stuff over the past year and a half. No. And so I got a job, and I worked there for a year. And I started out writing. They had these little, they would do kind of longer form news pieces, kind of dig into something, whether it was international or, national. But then they would have a quick sum up of the other news. And I started by writing those. And then I kind of moved on to writing the bigger pieces. And then I actually went in the field a couple of times and did some pieces. And it was an amazing experience. I lived in New Delhi. I learned some Hindi. I got around in rickshaws. It was just really, really fun. I really enjoyed myself.
The precursor to Uber, of course.
The precursor to Uber, totally that. And also from there is when I kind of decided, even though I had a great time, that I didn't want to be a journalist. And I don't know why, I think it just sort of didn't feel creative enough, And then from that, I decided, okay, I want to go to film school. I kind of just made that leap.
Okay.
And I applied to a few film schools, and
You graduated from Princeton?
I graduated from Princeton. I spent a year and let's say 15, 16 months, let's say, in New York, and then would have been I guess about a year in India, and then sort of within all that, I decided to apply to film school, and my mother helped me a lot because it was hard to do from India. I had to get her to get my grades and this and my GRE scores and all that stuff. And I got into USC film school, and that's what brought me to Los Angeles, essentially. So that's sort of the backstory before I got here. Yeah.
Go Trojans.
Yeah, there you go.
Going to USC was a really incredible experience for me because I had transferred into USC from Chapman originally. And so it was very interesting because I realized that the tone and culture of the film school mattered so much. Because at Chapman, everybody who went to Chapman, not to dig on Chapman,
Sure.
because they've really built out the program. But at the time I went, everybody saw Chapman as their second choice school. People would be walking around the dorms with UCLA and USC jerseys.
Right.
And so USC, everybody there was happy to be there, excited to be working on stuff. It was just a kind of a really great sigh of relief when I actually went there. And also, like, some of the more memorable professors I had. I had 2 classes with Drew Casper, unfortunately.
I avoided him.
Yes. And one of the things I also loved about USC was they had the student production office where you could
Right.
just go get reliable internet, because internet wasn't always reliable in the dorms.
Yep.
And you could actually just interact with other students working on projects. And that sense of community was really wonderful. What was your experience with USC then?
It was, pardon me, very positive for me too. I mean, we definitely have people, which I totally get also, who left after a year or 6 months because they're like, I can just go work and get my experience that way. But for me, I really felt like I really don't know anything. You know what I mean? I really did feel like I don't know anything about how to, you know, run a camera, you know, edit anything, do anything. Like, I've never done this before. I've never written a screenplay. I've never, you know.
Right.
So for me, they kind of provided me with that belief, you know what I mean? Like, I had a grounding. I was like, oh, okay, you know, I get it. Like, I can learn enough in these 3 years that I can feel like, okay, I understand, you know, what's going on to some extent, and I can go out in the workforce and believe in myself. So I think it definitely helped me with giving me confidence that I could do this, and certainly skills. I learned how to, you know, work the Avid. I mean, all that stuff that you eventually can use, you know, and that is so useful. Thank you. And also made, obviously, good friends there who are still my friends today, you know. And also I found, I don't know if you found this, but not even in a high level way, but I feel like almost every job I've gotten has had some connection to USC in some way. Just in as much as, even if it's just somebody I know I went to film school with who's like, hey, they're looking for a producer over here, or hey, I need a writer for this. And not every single one, but a lot of them had some connection to USC. You know, especially, you know, when I got out, I felt like, you know, and part of it is maybe that the name has some credibility, but even beyond that, it's just that I knew people who were working in the business because they had gotten out of USC a year before me or something, you know. And so for me, that was great. So for me, it was a super positive experience. I was also lucky. I was like a TA for 2 years out of 3, so I didn't have much in the way of student loans. So that helps a lot too, because that's always a drag to be saddled with that. And so, yeah, nobody wants that. And
every time I used to do this, I would tell people I graduated USC, and they would say like, oh, that's a really good school. And I'd be like, yeah, that's what the debt collectors keep telling me.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, undergraduate is tougher because you can't do things like be a TA and stuff, which, you know, right, yeah. But yeah, no, so for me, it was definitely super positive. It really, I think, helped me to feel that I could do this for a living, you know? Yeah. And I could have probably done it a different way, but for, I think, the way I'd been brought up and stuff, it was kind of like, oh, school is kind of a safe way to do that, you know? Yeah.
Was there a moment at USC where you realized, like, oh, I made the right choice?
You mean in terms of my career or USC or? Career. Probably when, you know, we did these 546s, right? The final projects we would do. And my documentary was like chosen to be like, you know, one of the 546s. And so
for those who don't know,
yes,
546 is the school-sponsored documentary program where they pick 3 or 4 students to helm a documentary they make over the course of the semester and then release it. And that's kind of, they release it a great fanfare.
Yeah. And it's also just, absolutely correct. And so I think when I pitched, you know, you go and you pitch your idea, everyone pitches their idea, and then they choose a few. And when my idea was chosen, I was like, oh, okay, maybe I can do this. Like, I've chosen the right, you know, like I've got ideas that people are attracted to, that they are interesting, you know. And yeah, it was just like, okay, I guess, okay, I think I made the right choice. This is good, you know. Like, that also kind of just like bolstered my confidence a little bit more to be like, oh, okay, good. People like what I have to say. I'm glad to hear that.
And what was your documentary on?
It was about non-Hindus, kind of Westerners, you would say, who converted to Hinduism in different ways. And so we followed some Hare Krishnas and some folks who joined the Vedanta Society here in Los Angeles. And then kind of randomly, I remember we heard about somehow in Hinduism there's a god named Shiva, and he is I don't know what your podcast is rated, but he is worshipped in the phallic form, and it's like a big mound that he'll be worshipped in, and we somehow heard
curses my
there you go. Yeah, that's good. So phallic isn't that bad. So I was going to say so we heard that there was these people up north who were having this like kind of this thing going on where they were worshiping this. We were like, what is this? And so we got a little bit of trouble for this because you're not, you're supposed to be like, this is the only place you can take the camera. We went a little rogue and we took the cameras and we went up north, but it was, and we did get in some trouble for it, but I think everyone agreed it was great footage because it was just like, you're like, what is happening here? And they're like pouring yogurt on this big rock thing. And we were like, what's going on? And it was like a bunch of white people doing that. Yeah. We're like, what is happening?
Now I need to find this documentary.
That's right. Yeah. And it was really fun, and so it was just like a fun experience. And, I'll be honest, it's not like the documentary itself, the end result changed my life, but the making of it really made me feel like, oh, okay, this is fun. I like doing this. I like being in production. I like being in post-production. I like doing this stuff, Yeah.
So then you graduate, you get your master's degree from USC, and I think a lot of people wonder, like, whether they've gone to film school or not, what happens next? And what did you find were your most successful strategies after you graduated to start your career?
Yeah. For me, definitely, because it was early enough in the days of Avid and of nonlinear editing that having that skill set definitely helped. I mean, it still helps. Obviously, it's a great skill. But I was able to fairly quickly get some job offers to be an assistant editor. Yeah. And so I was an assistant editor on a feature film called Mojave Moon, which was like a very low budget film. But again, like I got the experience of like working with a real editor and like organizing everything for her and like seeing a real director and he's coming in and giving notes and you're like, okay, this is cool, and I kind of stayed in editing for a bit. I ended up editing A&E biographies, the stuff that was, like on A&E years ago.
Yeah.
And I edited actually, it was funny because I went into that, again, a USC connection, a friend of mine who brought me in to be an assistant editor. And I was going in, and I ran into someone else from USC, and she's like, you're here to interview to be an assistant editor? I was like, yeah. She's like, we should just be an editor. I was like, oh, okay. I was like, and so I went to the woman who was interviewing me and I was like, I think I should just be an editor. And she was like, okay, sure. Especially because she knew like Cecily, the woman who had, because I think Cecily had told her she should be an editor, and she was like, all right. And so instead of being an assistant editor, I just kind of became an editor and I started editing the A&E biographies,
That never happened.
No.
That never happens in the industry. Like if even as like a USC student, if I went into some place and I said I should just be a whatever,
100%.
yeah, I would have gotten laughed out of the building.
Completely. And I think some of it was my ignorance, to my benefit. You know what I mean? Because I think now I'd be like, oh my God, I would never say something like that. People would think I was such an ass, But back then I think I was just like, oh yeah, okay, Cecily says I should be an editor. I'll just go tell him I should be an editor. I was young enough, and I was like, that's good,
Yeah.
So I ended up editing A&E biographies for about a year. Yeah.
And so you and I have both worked in unscripted reality TV. Was that where you started learning like string outs, for example? Or did that come later?
That's probably a little later, just because A&E biographies are very much like clip and still shows,
Okay.
So I probably did do some string outs of interviews, just to kind of help. But we really had we had a writer and a director and an editor. So the writer would really come in with a script and end up being a woman who I'm still friends with today. We really hit it off. But she came in with a script, and obviously we would change things. We'd start putting it together. Like, okay, well, this doesn't work. What do we do with this? But we would, in those particular shows, we would always start with a script. It was only a little later, probably on my next show, that I started stringing stuff out. That show was much more kind of script based at that point. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but it also kind of interestingly, I feel like I realized I learned as I go along. Like, it kind of made me realize I didn't really want to be an editor either, and partly just because of the lifestyle, like in the office. I mean, you're very isolated as an editor. You sit in a room by yourself. You wait for material. You wait for people to come in.
No sunlight.
No sunlight, exactly. If you're a vampire, it's fine. I know wonderful editors, but most of them are a little more introverted, and it wasn't the perfect fit for my personality. So I was like, I'd really like to do something more in the field, something where I can be out with people more, and so that was good. I kind of learned that, and I was like, all right, let me start thinking about what I could do. And I started looking around at other jobs, and I ended up getting a job on an A&E special about the history of underwear. which was kind of like starting from corsets and whatever and all the way through. And it was, again, I worked with terrific people, and one of the women became a good friend of mine. And, we went to New York to shoot some stuff like at the Fashion Museum. It was a fun show. And that's where I started kind of doing more like, I wasn't the editor, so I wasn't physically stringing stuff out in this particular show. As you know, it depends on the show. Sometimes a producer will string stuff out, sometimes they won't, But I started thinking, it was fun to just kind of be able to shoot stuff in the field. I had some other shows for that same company, like about cooking, about other things. And I enjoyed just kind of being out in the field and then coming in usually and working with someone in post. Sometimes it was separated, but sometimes you got to come in and work with post as well.
So as far as timeline, this is probably about, I'm guessing, 10 years after you graduated Princeton.
Let me think. This is probably... It might be more like 8 years or something, but yeah, but in that range. You're not far off. Yeah, for sure. That stuff all came kind of quickly, that first stuff. There's always lulls, right? The first stuff came pretty quickly. And then I was sort of, I think
like your success in the film industry does kind of directly depend on whether you graduate before, during, or after a recession.
Right, 100%. So much of it is luck. You know what I mean? Yeah, so much of it is luck because, you just hit something at the wrong moment and you're kind of screwed, So, unfortunately, yeah. But yeah, I kind of found that niche as a writer-producer in and in the field, in these kind of cable, unscripted shows, and kind of I couldn't even remember the names of them all, honestly, but I kind of went on a string of doing a bunch of that stuff, and was like, okay, this is fine. I can do this for a few years. I was a little like, I'm not quite sure where I'm heading with it, but that's okay,
What made you want to point to producing specifically, and what kind of a producer did you find yourself? For me, I've always found like my big strength was logistics. Like I grew up the son of two accountants, so budgeting, admin, all of that kind of came very naturally to me. And so I saw an immediate correlation, like, I didn't come from money. I don't have access to stars. The way for me to get in the door is as a line producer. When you started looking around at branching out from editing into writing and producing, why were you attracted to that creative producer in unscripted, or was just that the natural culmination of your previous work?
I think sort of a combination of both, but I think in a word, I would say I've always felt like my strength is story. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that is like what I felt I was able to bring to my jobs. I was like, I can look at this and kind of understand what the story could be or should be, and I can always. The boss might not agree, but I can pitch it to you, and and I can always give you a reasonable version of it that you might be like, okay, that might work. You know what I mean? Whether or not that ends up being what it is, And for me, I felt like that's what I sort of brought to it right off the bat. Like that's where I can help, is I can help with kind of like putting this together and thinking about it as a story, And I forgot one job I did have that was kind of interesting with that sort of in mind is I told you that I edited A&E biographies, but I also wrote and directed intimate portraits for Lifetime. Similar idea, but for women, and much more like kind of puff pieces because they were all alive, and they would usually be, most of them, I did one on Harriet Tubman, so they're not all alive, but, and Jean Harlow. But
it would be weird if you produced the hard-hitting, anti-Harriet Tubman.
Could you imagine? I'm like, this woman it was all alive. That would be unfortunate. But they were fun in their own way because you would get to go to their house, their beautiful home, or a nice hotel and interview them and interview their friends who were all actors. So you got to meet all these kind of cool actors. And I did that as a freelancer. So I wrote and directed them, and then I would go work with the editor in the edit facility. And they were crazy schedules. They were really cheap. Yeah. And so we were like working till 2 a.m. It was nuts, But then they asked me to come in for a year and just kind of run their company as a producer in-house, just like the person, There were 2 EPs, but they were like, day to day, we want you to do this. Right. And I did it for a year, which was enough because, again, like I said, it was cheap. And so there was not much, it was crazy hours and not enough pay. But it was a good experience because I felt like I learned, it's like from script all the way through color and sound mix and just like doing every aspect and having your eye on everything. Yeah. And I felt like that really helped me understand how things were made more globally, and that was great. I was like, that that really helped me as like someone who could, again, it was kind of a crazy job, but occasionally I'd be driving there going, oh my God, yeah, could I get a small fender bender? So like, no one, I don't want anyone to be hurt. I don't want anyone to be hurt, just a little, so I don't have to go to work. It was one of those jobs.
Jumped out and attacked my
That's
car.
right, yeah. Actually, if you want a story, one story around that, because, we would interview.
Hey everyone, quick break here. If you listen to the Producers Lounge podcast, you know I'm obsessed with how stories get made and who gets to make them. That's why I wrote Threads of Imagination, a book about collaborative storytelling and the art of building worlds together. Published by DSTL Arts nonprofit, which supports young BIPOC artists, the book pulls from my own personal history and even from my family history and the tradition of itinerant tribes telling stories around the campfire. Threads of Imagination is a guide to collaborative storytelling and how ideas grow, evolve, and become something bigger when people create together. Whether you're a filmmaker, writer, artist, or just someone who loves the process behind good stories, this book gives you practical tools, creative prompts, and real-world insights to elevate your craft. That's right, Threads of Imagination is full of exercises, behind-the-scenes lessons, and inspiration to help you create with purpose and community. If you're looking to jumpstart your next project or sharpen your storytelling instincts, this is the place to go. You can find Threads of Imagination wherever books are sold online. All right, back to the Producers Lounge podcast.
Jumped out and attacked my
That's right, yeah. Actually, if you want a story, one story around that, because we would interview celebrities, and we did one on Raquel Welch, and so this was she had she was a big celebrity obviously, but she also had been a while since she'd been a big star, but the company, without asking me, I wasn't the director of it, I was the producer at that time, right. But we brought in a writer director. They had given her final cut. Which seemed to be a mistake, which I didn't usually do, but apparently she wouldn't do it otherwise. So I was like, okay. So we brought in a writer director, and the director, they had a conversation on the phone, she and Raquel just decided, I don't like her. I don't like this woman. And we were like, why? She's perfectly fine. I don't like her. So we're like, okay. So I and the executive producer were on the line with her, just trying to kind of like, okay, Raquel, everything's cool. We had this whole conversation. And finally, she's like, I like you. To me, I was like, oh, really? And she's like, you do my interview. I was like, okay, all right. And the executive producer was like, yes, you do the interview. I was like, all right. And then I had to explain to the poor director. I felt so bad because I was like, look, it's not about you. And I felt like I'm trying to take over and do it. You're the director. I'm not taking the credit, but she wants me to do the interview. So, we did the interview, and she came and she looked gorgeous. She comes in and she does the interview, and she's very professional about it. All good. Mm-hmm. Then, we did the cut, we sent it in, and then she had us to her house to give us notes. We went to her house, me and the director, and I just remember it was hours. It went on forever, and we were just like, oh my God. And literally, she was snacking and stuff. She didn't offer us water. We were like, oh my God, when will this end? And we were both like, oh no. And finally we got through that. And then one other kind of funny thing, it was Tony Goldwyn's dad, the original, Samuel Goldwyn Jr. Sorry, Samuel Goldwyn Jr. He wanted to be, he was going to be the show. She'd done a movie for them recently. She's part Latina, so it was kind of a Latina role. Mm-hmm. And so we got to his offices to interview him, and he said, I really want to do this show for you. I promised I would do it. I said, yes. And he said, but I don't like Raquel and I don't want to lie. And I said, okay, that's interesting. All right. So I said, I respect that, and we will find a way through this interview,
Oh, and this person is doing the interview.
He's doing the interview. He's a big deal. Samuel Goldwyn Jr., I was like, yeah, okay. And he'd produced the film and all this, and I was like, and so it was very funny because we kind of figured out the place to go because the character was a very difficult person. Mm-hmm. And I kind of was like, well, what did you think about Raquel for this role when you met her? And he said, she was perfect for this role. No one could have been more perfect because the woman was so difficult in the movie, but without saying Raquel was difficult, he basically was able to be honest, she was perfect for this role. And it's like, there's our bite. We'll use that. So it was always kind of a hoot, getting to meet some of these people and just be like, you never know what's going on, Yeah, for sure.
So it sounds like that was a very formative, very educational experience.
It was.
And you were there for what sounds like a couple of years?
A couple of years. Between being a freelancer and being the producer. I was only the producer in charge for 1 year. They wanted me to stay on, but I kind of had my fill. I'm like, okay, I've learned. It's kind of a crazy place. I don't know that I need more of this, Yeah. Yeah. And it was around then, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but it was around then I decided I also want to try different things. And so I made a short film soon after that. And it was kind of like, I want to try to do something of my own, something scripted, And that kind of took me to sort of the next like
And
step.
that was Blessing.
Blessing, correct. Yeah. So that was Blessing. And great experience. Again, like just two weekends. Sorry, go
Before we
ahead.
get into
Yes,
Blessing,
absolutely.
I do want to ask,
Yeah.
because like that is like, as an in-house producer, you are in the thick of it. You are managing, as you said, everything from ideation all the way to color and deliverables. What was the biggest, I guess, most surprising lesson for you in that environment? And feel free to not mention any names,
Of course.
in order to protect the innocent.
Yeah. No, for sure. And I mean, I probably do have to not mention some names because some of these things happen like that are difficult, right? Like, I one thing that surprised me, because I think when you've done something for a while, you don't realize that it's not easy. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, right. And of course, other things are hard. I'm not saying, oh, everything's so easy for me. But this particular thing, you've done it for a while. You're like, oh, it makes sense. Somebody who's smart who comes in can just do it. It's no problem. So I remember I hired a woman to write and direct a project. And super nice woman, super smart, and she came in. And she just kept turning in scripts that I would look at them, and my co-producer, like my friend Julie, and we'd look at them and we'd be like, it's just wrong, And I kept giving notes, and she just couldn't get it. And we had to fire her, And that is one thing I learned. I had to fire a lot of people that year. And that sucked. The first person I had to fire was a friend of mine.
This was early 2000.
Yeah. It's a friend of mine who was working there as an editor. And she actually went on to have a very good career in cinematography. In unscripted. Sorry about that. But she kind of was in the wrong place being an editor. And when I got there, they were like, okay, she's too slow. You're going to have to fire her. I'm like, what? This is like my first week. I'm like, you want me to go fire my friend?
Oh my God.
Yeah. And they were like, yeah, basically. And so I went there and I was like, I'm so sorry. I think you're great, but this is and she's like, it's fine. She was so nice about it. And it did turn out, I think, to be good for her because she moved on to cinematography, which is what she'd been interested in anyhow. She'd kind of taken a detour into editing, And so that was one thing I learned, part of it was they were cheap. And if you're cheap, you don't always get the best people, right? And when you don't get the best people, often you have to let people go. Julie and I started to joke, we had to take Polaroids or whatever, people just stick them on the wall of people we had fired that year because it got crazy. I had to fire so many people. And so that was an experience and a learning experience. And it did show me that, okay, everything takes some learning, you know what I mean? Like something might look from the out, like I'm like, oh, it's just putting some VO with some sound bites. But it's like, it actually is a process and a craft. And some people can do it better than others. There's other stuff I wouldn't do as well. So, it's like, and that was a good learning experience for me, just to be like, you got to fit the right person to the right job, and you do have to pay them enough. That helps too. That is pretty critical. Yeah.
That is unfortunate because in this industry, there is kind of a pervasive mentality. And I think it does start kind of at the film school level where I'm a visionary genius.
Yep.
And I'm on a budget, so I don't need somebody who's the most talented. I just need a warm body to do the job. And that's absolutely the worst way of looking at department heads who are literally your collaborative creatives.
Absolutely. I think the opposite is true. Like you always need to surround yourself with great people because, you're going to pay for it, in some way or another. Yeah.
So what lessons did you take from that into making Blessing?
I think, some of it was just like a personal, okay, I've done a lot of stuff for other people. I want to kind of make something of my own. So some of it's that. But I think it was kind of a sense, sort of what you're saying, like get people to do the stuff who are good at what they do. You know what I mean? And that is going to make your life a whole lot easier. When you go out and do this thing, it's going to make everything so much simpler. And it did. We got a great DP, editor, just the folks who did it knew what they were doing. And I hadn't done something like this before, so I really needed that too, And so I think I took that, and also it was sort of a story that had an Indian feel to it, so I wanted to kind of bring some of that into it as well. And yeah, so it was just like, I remember it was just like 2 weekends that we shot. We did it at my sister's ex-mother-in-law's house up in Santa Clarita, which was very nice of her to donate that to us. And, and just kind of put it together quickly. But it had a nice festival run. It played at the LA Asian American Film Festival here in town, a shorts festival in Canada. And it actually ended up, this was kind of cool. There was a a program. It was actually sponsored by Luna Bar, of all things, that was taking women's short films and showing them around the country. So they actually made a little money. They chose mine, and it got put in that. And at one point there in Austin, there was a women's film group was sponsoring that kind of, not just my film, but that whole event there. And they basically, the Luna people like said, hey, is there anyone there here who wants to get flown to Austin? I was just like, yes, immediately, you know. I was like, I waited before anyone else could say yes. And so they flew me out to Austin and put me up, and I got to go meet this women's film group and go to the screening and talk to them, and it was great. So it was just like that's something else too, just kind of, you know, with the short film, just be open to new experiences, you know, and trying new stuff, because you don't know where it's going to take you, you know. It was a lot of fun.
And then I see on here you also wrote and directed The Playback Singer, which came a few years later.
Yeah, so between like Blessing and The Playback Singer, I had written another script actually, which kind of a more serious sort of a drama script, and did well in a bunch of screenwriting competitions, and I got a casting director off of that, and you know, and we got a couple of actresses interested, but it was just, as we all know, hard work, you know, to get a film made. And so eventually, and we kind of realized, okay, we're not going to be the best people at maybe putting all the money together. That's not maybe our strength, you know. My husband, Mike Blum, was my producer on that, but we just were like, okay, maybe we don't have this. So I decided to write something else, which could be done in a much more contained way, you know, on a much smaller budget that we could just raise from friends and family. And so I wrote The Playback Singer. It took a while to figure out sort of the story I wanted to tell and how to contain it. But eventually I ended up writing this story of a couple. A woman is Indian and the guy is white. And her father is a playback singer in India. And that means basically, you know, like most of the big Hindi films in India are musicals. Yes. Yeah, right? And so what they do is they record all the songs first, and then they'll play them on set, and people would mouth to the music. And so the idea is that he's that guy. And I actually got the idea because my mom and I were at Disney Hall. She wanted to see, there was a big playback singer, this woman, I think it was Lata Mangeshkar, big playback singer. She was there singing. Oh, wow. And there was an opening act, and it was another playback singer, a guy. And my mom leaned over to me at one point in the performance, she's like, he's just kind of a second-rate guy, playback singer. He just does TV. It's like, okay, I work in television, but that's fine, whatever. Thank you, yes. But I was like, oh, that's kind of a funny idea, sort of a washed-up second-rate playback singer, you know. And so the idea was this guy comes, the father comes estranged from his daughter, but he's going to be doing a tour in her area, like a playback singing tour. He comes and stays with them, and it turns out the tour is a scam, and his money, and he actually invested money in the tour, and he lost the money. And so he gets stuck with them. His daughter's a lawyer, so she's like, I'm going to try to get your money back. Right. But he ends up stuck basically with the son-in-law because the daughter's off at work every day, and the son-in-law is trying to figure out what he's doing. He's building a jungle gym for a friend, and he's trying to figure out, like, what do I want to do with my life? I want to be an architect. And he and the father-in-law initially clash. They really clash, and the father-in-law is like, why don't you have a real job, kind of thing, you know? Yeah.
Architect isn't a real job.
But he's not quite an architect. He's making jungle gyms, yeah. But also a little bit based on my judgmental Indian family. But they clash, but eventually it kind of becomes a bromance between the two of them, and they sort of ally up, you know? And it is a dramedy, and it's sort of mainly between these three people, and shot at my house and my mother's house and a few other locations. So we contained, you know, for budgetary reasons, we contain the amount of locations and the number of people in the cast and all that good stuff. And Mike, my husband, who was the producer on it, was very good at getting favors, like for camera and for all kinds of stuff. And so, yeah, we did it on a very low budget. It was a lot of fun to do. And it had a small theatrical release. It was out on VOD. It was out digitally. You can still find it online, and got some really nice reviews, won some awards. So it was just it was a great experience. I mean, it was really it was hard, as you know, to make something like this, super hard, 18-day shoot. And, thank you, ice, fantastic. That's what we're talking about, yeah. Thank you. But, very worthwhile. Again, just like a tremendous learning experience, just like, we did test screenings, we did that, just to learn the whole process, again, a different sort of process from making unscripted or making reality, so that was really, yeah, that was great. That was a terrific, it's kind of a dream that I wanted to make a movie, and I got to. So that was nice.
What was the most surprising lesson in making a playback singer?
Good question. Well, it was really hard. I don't know if that was a surprising lesson. I think I knew, but I still, you know what it is? Also, like on a set like that, is a lot of personalities to deal with. You know what I mean? And I think, and there was overall a very good attitude on set, but there's always going to be a few people where you're like, okay, have to deal with this. And that is that can take up a lot of your energy. You know, you have to kind of try to find a way to not let that take over, like, especially if you're the director and you have to focus on the scenes, you know, to not let that take over, like, your whole, like, mind, you know, and your, like, kind of emotional energy too. And so that was a important thing to learn.
So what did you do to cope with that?
I would sometimes just walk around the block, literally, and just kind of, I would sometimes walk with my husband and just blow off steam, you know what I mean?
Got it.
And sometimes I would just like sit in a corner somewhere and just like go over the script. Like, I'm just going to focus on the script, you know? And I had good, other than my husband, we had a great other co-producer, and she also kind of deflect, you know what I mean? Like, she was very good at knowing how to handle, you know, like, but I mean, and that was a small part of that. Kind of came towards the end. And, you know, independent film shoots are very hard and they're like exhausting by the end. And everyone's like, oh my God, I can't believe what long days we're doing. And also there was it was understandable that sometimes nerves would fray. But yeah, so that was just good to learn how to deal with those things that come up, deal with personalities, but also like kind of keep your focus on the work. I think that was a really good lesson that I learned from that. And it was surprising. I think I kind of thought it'd be like, it's going to be like love and peace. We're all going to be so happy doing this, you know. Well, not so much. Sometimes, some days were amazing, you know what I mean? Not every day.
Did I tell you the Penny Marshall story? One of my first jobs out of film school was I got an assistant job working for Penny Marshall. And I was literally working out of her house. I would be talking with all of her producing partners. And the thing that she would keep constantly saying is, you got to know how to get the actress out of a trailer. You know? And so one day I was just sitting with her, just me and her, and I was asking, Penny, how do you get the actress out of the trailer? And she looks at me and goes, whatever it takes. Lie, beg, whatever you got to do, plead, whatever you got to do.
That's great. She's right. That's awesome. Yeah.
But with that being said, while you were directing Playback Singer, you were also balancing being a story producer on big unscripted shows like The Bachelor. How many seasons were you on The Bachelor for?
Gosh, I'm trying to even think. So I worked on The Bachelor for probably did between Bachelor, Bachelorette. I did one season of Bachelor in Paradise. I might have done like, 15 seasons, maybe more.
Wow.
Yeah, because, you know, they do 3 a year, you know, right? So, you know, 2 to 3 a year, depending on what they're doing. You know, now they've added on the Golden Bachelor, all this kind of stuff. I mean, I'm not there anymore, but they, you know, that was one of the reasons actually, though, I could make the film, because it was like a year-round job, you know, and that always came back. So I was like, I can go shoot my film in the summer, and in the fall, I'll have a job. You know what I mean? And so that made a difference, you know, because actually before I was on Bachelor, I was on a show for MTV for a couple of seasons, but I've been on a lot of shows that were one season here and there. And then I did do one season on The Amazing Race. But I was like, it's hard to always be looking for work, you know? And so and I did have a period, I think for like 6 months, where I couldn't find a job, where I was kind of like, is this it? Like, is it over? Like, am I not going to be able to find work? You know? And then I found a job, but you know, it was kind of my biggest dry period I'd had. And so one of the appeals of The Bachelor was definitely, I was like, oh, this show always comes back. So I can do something else, like in the summer, I can do something else, you know, and I'll know that it's always there if I want it, you know? Yeah. And to me, that was definitely a big draw of it. And very nice people I worked with too, you know. And you know, again, I'll be honest, I never really watched the show before or since, but it was interesting to work on a show that so many people knew. You know what I mean? Like, you tell people who work on The Bachelor, they're like, oh my God, what's it like on there? What is it this? And you're like, oh, a lot of people watch the show. Okay, yeah, okay, I get it. All right, this is a big show. Okay. Yeah. And that was interesting, you know, because people were automatically interested when you told them what you did. Yes.
And as a story producer, you're actually on set. You're in the little like video village room. I assume you're taking notes, or do you delegate that to the APs?
Well, it's a couple of ways they do things. Because again, every show, right, is different. Right. And I've certainly done both ways, but in Bachelor, usually the story producers are in the office. If you're doing episode 1, which I've done a couple of times, you go, you spend the whole night at the mansion. You probably do take some of your own notes, but someone else is also taking, because it's just huge and there's so many cameras and you can't cover everything. But you get more of a sense of what's going on. The first night you see who's going to be eliminated, who's definitely got chemistry. So, you know, you're going to be following that as you go along. So the couple of times I did episode 1, I was at the mansion and I spent, you know, the night there, whatever. But in general, otherwise, you did not, you were kind of separated completely. Also, partly because after usually a couple of episodes they travel. You know what I mean? They were gone, and they kind of want the footage to be coming back, and you'd be dealing with it while they're on the road, right? So due to the nature of that show, you're always kind of split up. But they have people. The field producers certainly have story chops, and sometimes they're checking in with you, like, what about this? What about that? And what I liked about that show too was just like, we were all kind of together. If it's like, okay, this is my episode, or maybe these 2 episodes. So let me find out what happened over here with this one and that one. And okay, that's how we tell this whole story. So that part of it was always interesting, just to tell a big story over a season. How do you do that? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So that was always fun. And
what are the secrets behind actually doing that?
remembering a lot of stuff. There's a lot of people, that's for sure. I do have a pretty good memory. That helps. And keeping it all in your head. Of course, there's notes. And also kind of what we were saying, like relying on other people. I mean, there's loggers, and they would come to you and be like, "Hey, I saw something really weird or funny or strange at this point." And you're like, "Great, let me go look at that and see what that means for other stuff." So it was just kind of keeping, like kind of in touch with everybody. It was very much a kind of a team effort, in that way, because nobody knew the whole show. You know what I mean? Like it was just kind of, and of course, this, like if you go in the field and we would have screenings with them, they're like, "Oh, we shot this great thing like this." You're like, "Well, I gotta be real with you. That didn't really come out the way you think it did, And so there was a lot of that as well. So it was kind of like taking what they wanted it to be and what we saw it was, and figuring out how to make it work from there. So, yeah.
It's funny that you talk about like the collaborative aspect, because the DGA did this thing with Spielberg.
Okay.
Because they interview him every year for like top 5 director nominees and Oscars, and so the first year he did it, he was like, "Oh, my secret is these sneakers I wear because I'm walking around." And he said it as a joke.
Right.
But apparently a bunch of people actually took them seriously and actually went out and bought those sneakers.
Right.
But then the next year, he was like, everyone thought I was serious, but no, the real secret behind being a great director or producer or whatever is listening to your team members, listening to every good idea that comes up, and just listening to your team. And that really sounds like what happened on The Bachelor, and one of the reasons it's such a great show.
Yeah, I mean, there are definitely people in charge who can say yay, nay, but yes, I think the idea is they know that everybody is watching different footage, everybody's seeing different things, everyone is in touch with different parts. So if someone tells you this happened, you're going to be like, "Okay, I'm interested," yeah, or "I think this is interesting because of this." Okay, great, let me do that. And so that was always like, to me, that was the fun of it. You know what I mean? It was kind of like, after several years, I got kind of sick of it. I left, but the fun, when it was fun, was sort of having that kind of sense of discovery of like, "Oh, there's so much footage. What happened over here? How did this play out?" And always kind of the unexpected comedy of what happened, and inevitably, yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
So you're working on StoryCorps now. What else do you have coming up that you're really excited about?
Well, several things. One other thing, when I was at Bachelor, is I'm a member of the Producers Guild, the singer you are, and I was at a committee meeting, I think an independent film committee meeting, and there were 4 women, like we were all around the same age, and there was a slightly older woman, and she said, "You 4 should go have coffee together." And we were like, "Okay." So we did. We went and had coffee together somewhere out here in Studio City. And I remember one woman, Wendy, she came in and she was really hoarse. She'd lost her voice, but she's like, "I just sold a show." I was like, "What?" Yeah. You know what? She'd sold a show, a scripted show, and I was like, "Oh, cool." And we talked a little bit. She had a kid, I had a kid, so we kind of connected. And then we talked, and this was, and we said, "Oh, we should try to work on something together." And we started writing something. It was kind of sitcom-y. It didn't really play to either of our strengths, but it was sort of, we had an idea and we kind of played it out for a while. Well, I don't know about that, but we liked each other and we liked working together, and we worked together well creatively. So then I was looking, I get like, whatever, these emails from long reads or whatever, like stories that are interesting stories, always looking around. And I saw one, like an old story from the 90s, from the Texas Monthly, about the rise and fall of the silicone breast implant in 1980s Houston. And I was like, "Oh, that's interesting." And Wendy was from outside Houston.
Sorry, the silicone
breast implant, correct. Yes, it is.
Right.
And kind of how it affected the whole culture and economy of the city of Houston, because it, doctors, like plastic surgeons, strip clubs, the whole, women were getting it, because they thought it would help their self-esteem or get them a better job, all this crazy stories, And actually the city got very much on board with it, because it brought, the strip club where they had the first enhanced dancers, brought in all these tourists. It was kind of helped make it a convention city. It was kind of nuts, right? So I said to Wendy, I said, "What do you think of this idea for our TV series?" And she's like, "Oh yeah." She's like, "And was like a kid, like, we would drive into Houston, you see these huge billboards for these like surgeries and stuff. She's like, I remember that. And so, I happened to know someone, the writer. I knew someone who had worked at the Texas Monthly, so she actually knew that writer.
Right.
Put me in touch with her. She was all into it.
Going back to your journalism background.
Going back to my journalism background, yes, my friend who had worked at the Texas Monthly, and we optioned that article, and we ended up selling it to the UCP, Universal, and then we all sold it together to Lifetime.
Wow.
Yeah, and we were not the writers on it, even though we wanted to be, because we did not have the experience.
Right.
But we pitched them, like we actually went to USA first, because I have a good friend who's an exec there. And he said, it's probably not right for us, but come on in. Like, and I said, great. I told Wendy, it's a practice pitch. It's good, And she's yeah. So we pitched it, and Michael really liked it, actually. He pitched it upstairs, and they were like, yeah, it's not for USA, but she should take it to UCP, to our partners. And he said, yeah, you should take it to them because they pitch all over town. Right. We pitched it to them. They liked it. They brought us on, but they said, look, you guys have not written anything that's like become a big show. We need a writer who can, we kind of were like, should we not? We're like, it's going to be a good experience. And kind of saying yes to stuff. And so we agreed to do it, and we ended up partnering with Charlize Theron's company, Denver and Delilah Productions, because they actually came to UCP like, hey, we have an idea for a brush show. They're like, we kind of have that show, but maybe you two want to talk, And the producer there, I'll definitely say her name because she's wonderful, Laverne McKinnon. She was in charge then. She was wonderful. She's a terrific person, and she really brought us in and helped us figure out how do you pitch this thing? How do you get this thing out there? Mm-hmm. Together we looked for writers. We found a writer together who we loved working with, and we ended up pitching it to several places and sold it to Lifetime. And then it went through the script stage. They changed leadership, and that was the end of it. But that's okay. It was a good experience.
Right.
And then through that, actually, because Wendy and I said, okay, we had some success. Let's keep working together. Mm-hmm. And I met a guy, he was like a consulting exec at Lifetime when we pitched. We both were like, you kind of look familiar. Turned out we were at film school around the same time, going back to USC. Huh. And so he's like, oh, let's go get a coffee sometime or whatever. We had lunch together, and he had left Lifetime by then. Mm-hmm. And he had started working for a Canadian studio. And I said, oh, Wendy and I just wrote something. It's about a mother and daughter team up in the northern part of Washington State who start smuggling pharmaceutical meds over the Canadian border. Oh, wow. Because they start a business, but also the mom is sick and she needs help. Right. And he's like, oh, yeah, okay. He's like, we're interested in anything Canadian. Let me look at that. So they like that. They optioned that. Wow. Yeah, and then through him, we ended up meeting folks in Zero Gravity, and they became our managers. And so it kind of that show, kind of because of the strikes and because of COVID, kind of got, even though we still push it because our manager actually loves it still too, but kind of, as the last few years have been tough. Everything kind of got pushed down. But because of that, we ended up getting manager, and we still work together as writers today. We just wrote a limited series based on a true crime story. Yeah, so we're continuing to push all that stuff and trying to get that stuff made. I'm actually just starting to develop another feature idea too, an indie feature idea. So yeah, still doing all that stuff alongside. And actually, I guess one last thing to mention is, I stopped working in reality at a certain point. I'll be honest, partly because of Trump, and I was sort of it kind of feels connected, And I do feel especially more the things we learned about The Apprentice, even though I never worked on The Apprentice, and I felt like maybe I can do something, better, and I left. And one of the things I did is I ended up, I was fortunate, I ended up getting a job on an HBO premium doc series. So just as a consulting producer. It was about meme stocks, like AMC, and it's called Gaming Wall Street. Again, another USC connection, helped me meet the folks there. And I just worked with them as consulting producer for 5-6 weeks, but it's a great gig, really fun, all remote at that point because it was during the pandemic. And apparently, once you do a premium cable series, you're suddenly a premium cable person, which is great. Because then I got a job on a Paramount Plus series about the illegal trade in rhino horn. Yeah, and that was, and I was on that for 10 months, and I was the supervising story producer, and I ended up with a director credit on the 4th episode because I ended up writing most of the script. Fantastic. Yeah, and unfortunately, it became a tax write-off by Paramount Plus. What can you do? But I know, but I still put it on my resume. So it's been interesting. I kind of, as you know, in this business, you kind of put stuff together as you go along, you figure stuff out. So those were some of the things I kind of kept putting together. So, yeah. And so I'm still looking for work in doc as well, once things are hopefully starting to pick up again soon, as well as kind of pushing my own projects at the same time.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, with that being said, if you could go back to USC, we were just starting your master's degree. Mm-hmm. what advice would you give yourself?
I would give myself the advice to know that television was about to become a very big deal, honestly, and I would have become an assistant in a writer's room.
Nice.
Honestly, but you don't know, right? Like when I graduated, it was like indie film. Let me go try to make a doc. Let me try and do this,
Yeah.
And just a few years later, and again, I could have switched, but I kind of found myself in reality. It was all fine. I'm not even bemoaning, but I think if I could have had a little bit of a crystal ball, I would have been like, try to get a job in a writer's room. That's what I would have done. Yeah. So it's very practical, not like very like kind of idealistic advice. But I think otherwise I would say just keep. I think a lot of the business is perseverance. I mean, people, it's easy to give up. I get it. It's hard, So just keep persevering and doing stuff. And I think keep balance too. Like, I mean, I have a family, and not that everyone wants a family, but whatever way you keep balance, keep some balance in your life as well. And do the other stuff you want to do also,
And that is Season 3, Episode 24 of the Producers Lounge podcast. Thank you to my guest, Suju Vijayan, for joining us. You can find out more about her by checking out the show notes and subscribing to her YouTube channel at Greater Grander. Our intro and outro music today was Faster Does It by Kevin MacLeod. Our episode still image is provided by Suju Vijayan. We'd love to hear from you, and you can check out this week's accompanying article on greaterandgrander.com entitled Lights On, Budget Low, the ultimate at-home short film production guide for small brands. Link in the show notes. You can stay up to date by following us on YouTube and social media at the handle Greater Grander, all one word. Make sure to subscribe on YouTube or wherever fine podcasts are found. And also, if you like what we do, share this podcast with a group who you think will enjoy it. Join us next week for more cocktails and questions, and until then, keep producing dreams.